Why would 5 elite operators watch silently as a woman fell 8,000 feet into darkness? The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the Afghan night at 8,000 feet. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smell of aviation fuel. Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan sat strapped to the cabin floor, her harness securing her to the aircraft. She'd flown this route before, knew these mountains, trusted these men. That trust died the moment she felt the blade against her restraints. The crew chief's knife sliced through her harness with surgical precision. No hesitation, no explanation, just cold, deliberate motion. 3 seconds. That's all she had. 3 seconds to understand that the men she'd served beside, trained with, trusted with her life, were about to end it. 2 pairs of hands gripped her shoulders. She felt their strength, their certainty. They weren't nervous, weren't conflicted. This was planned, rehearsed. And in that terrible moment of clarity, Alex Morgan understood something she'd suspected but never wanted to believe. She'd become a problem that needed to disappear. They shoved her toward the open door. The wind screamed. The darkness below was absolute. No parachute strapped to her back. No rope tethering her to safety. No chance of survival. At least that's what Master Sergeant Blake Harmon believed as he watched her vanish into the night. His scarred face, illuminated green through night vision goggles, showed nothing. Professional indifference. Mission complete. "Package delivered," he said into his radio. The other operators nodded, all except one. Specialist Thomas Miller's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his rifle. Something wasn't right. He'd seen the way Harmon had looked at Morgan during the briefing. Not with respect, with something darker, something calculating. But Miller stayed silent. In Delta Force, you didn't question your team leader. Not when you were 8,000 feet above enemy territory. Not when the mission was already in motion. 8,000 feet below, Alexandra Morgan was falling through absolute darkness. Most people would scream, would flail, would spend their final seconds in terror, accepting the inevitable impact that would end everything. Most people would die before they hit the ground, their hearts stopping from pure fear. Alex Morgan wasn't most people. The cold mountain air tore at her uniform, ripped tears from her eyes, stole the breath from her lungs. Terminal velocity, 120 miles per hour, falling faster than a car on the highway, faster than thought, faster than prayer. Her mind had maybe 30 seconds before impact, 30 seconds to do the impossible. She didn't scream. Instead, she remembered. 10 years earlier, Fort Benning, Georgia, standing at attention before the most terrifying man she'd ever met. Master Sergeant William "Wild Bill" Westmoreland was 61 years old and looked like he'd been carved from granite and polished with sandpaper. His weathered face told stories of 3 decades in combat: Bosnia, Grenada, Desert Storm. Operations so classified they didn't have names, only numbers. He'd trained more Rangers than most people would meet in a lifetime, and he'd buried too many of them. "You think you're ready for Halo training, Morgan?" His voice was gravel scraped across steel. The kind of voice that made recruits stand straighter, made their spines lock, made them question every choice that led them to this moment. "Yes, Sergeant," Alex replied, eyes forward, chin level, refusing to blink under his inspection. Westmoreland circled her slowly, a predator evaluating prey. The late Georgia sun cast long shadows across the training ground. Somewhere in the distance, another group of Rangers ran drills, their cadence calls drifting on the humid air. 8 Rangers started this course last month, he said. 3 finished. What makes you different?" "I don't quit, Sergeant." He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the scar tissue on his knuckles, the burn mark on his neck, the way his left eye didn't track quite right. "Battle damage, the price of survival." "That's what they all say," he replied quietly. "But when you're falling through the air at terminal velocity, when your primary chute fails and you have seconds to deploy your reserve before you become a crater in the earth, That's when we learn who's a ranger and who just wears the tab. What Westmoreland didn't know then was that Alexandra Morgan had been falling her entire life. Her father, Master Sergeant Jason Morgan, had died in Panama during Operation Just Cause. Alex was 7 years old when the uniformed officers came to their door. She remembered her mother's scream, the way it seemed to tear the world apart. Remembered the folded flag, the rifle salute, the empty promise that his sacrifice mattered. Her mother never recovered. 2 years later, she followed him to the grave. Pills and vodka and the kind of pain that couldn't be survived. Alex became a ward of her uncle, himself a retired army sergeant who understood grief but didn't know how to heal it. So Alex learned to fall without breaking, learned to carry weight that should have crushed someone so young, learned that survival wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about deciding pain wouldn't decide your future. "I've read your file," Westmoreland continued. "Former competitive wingsuit flyer, national champion. Why'd you give that up for this?" Alex's eyes never wavered. "My father was a ranger, Sergeant. He used to say, 'Rangers lead the way.' I intend to honor that." Something shifted in Westmoreland's expression, almost imperceptible, a crack in the granite. He'd lost his only daughter 5 years earlier. Car accident. Drunk driver. She'd been 19, about to graduate from college, about to start a life that would never happen. Perhaps he recognized something in Morgan's determination, something familiar in the way she stood there, refusing to break, refusing to look away. "Your father was at Urgent Fury in Grenada," he said quietly. "I knew him, good man." That was the first day Westmoreland took personal interest in Morgan's training. Not that he made it easier for her. If anything, he pushed harder, made her jump more, train longer, endure conditions that would break most soldiers. He taught her the old ways, techniques developed during the Cold War, when special operators had to function without the technology modern soldiers took for granted. "Technology fails," he'd say, tapping his temple. "Equipment breaks, but this," he'd thump his chest over his heart, "this never fails a true ranger." On the night of her final qualification jump, Alex's primary chute malfunctioned, just as Westmoreland had predicted it would. She'd been falling through darkness at terminal velocity, the altimeter on her wrist screaming warnings, the ground rushing up to meet her with absolute certainty. She didn't panic, followed the procedures, deployed her reserve, landed safely in the designated zone, rolled to absorb impact, stood up on trembling legs that had just carried her through what should have been death. Westmoreland was waiting at the landing zone. She'd thought maybe he might finally offer praise, recognition, acknowledgement that she'd done well. Instead, he'd said, "Remember this feeling. Someday you might not have a reserve chute. Someday all you'll have is your training and your will to live. When that day comes, remember it's not the speed that kills you. It's the direction of impact. Control that and you might survive." Words that now, a decade later, echoed in her mind as she plummeted through the Afghan night. Control the direction of impact. Alex forced her body to stop tumbling, spread her arms and legs, creating drag, stabilizing her fall. The wind was a physical force, trying to tear her apart, but she'd done this 1,000 times before. Different circumstances, different equipment, but the physics were the same. She couldn't stop falling, but she could control how she fell. Her eyes, adjusted now to the darkness, scanned the terrain below. The Hindu Kush mountains were unforgiving. Jagged peaks, steep valleys, rock faces that would pulverize bone. But there, barely visible in the moonlight, a different shadow, darker than the surrounding rock, the distinctive shape of a valley with softer terrain. Snow, deep snow from the recent storms. It wouldn't save her. Nothing could save her from an 8,000-foot fall without a parachute. But it might, possibly, maybe, give her a chance at something other than instant death. She angled her body. Subtle shifts in position, the kind of micro-adjustments she'd learned from years of wingsuit flying. Moving through the air wasn't about fighting it. It was about becoming part of it. understanding its currents, its pressure, its terrible, beautiful physics. The ground was coming fast, too fast. She had seconds left, maybe 10, maybe less. At 32 years old, Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan was the most effective operator in her unit. 5'9", lean and athletic, with short dark hair and eyes that never seemed to settle on any one thing for long. The kind of woman who could disappear in a crowd or command a room depending on what the mission required. Her personnel file listed impressive qualifications: expert marksman, advanced survival training, fluent in 3 languages. What it didn't mention were the 12 operations she'd led disrupting weapons smuggling networks in the Kunar Valley. Operations that had eliminated 3 high-value targets, intercepted Soviet-era weapons bound for insurgent groups, saved countless American and Afghan lives. Operations that had apparently made her some very powerful enemies. 5 seconds. She'd figured it out 3 days ago. The pattern was too obvious once you knew where to look. Shipments she'd intercepted that should have been reported up the chain but vanished from official records. Weapons caches that disappeared before recovery teams arrived. Intelligence that seemed to leak from within her own command. Someone was running guns, and that someone had access to classified operational data. 3 seconds. She'd made one mistake. She'd trusted Captain Bennett when she'd brought him her suspicions, shown him the evidence she'd compiled, asked for his guidance on how to proceed through proper channels. 2 seconds. Bennett had smiled, told her she'd done the right thing, said he'd handle it personally. 1 second. The last thing Alex saw before impact was the snow-covered slope rushing up to meet her. Then the world exploded into white and pain and darkness. But somewhere in that darkness, she was still breathing. Have you ever woken up and not known if you were alive or dead? Alex opened her eyes to absolute darkness. Her first thought was that she'd gone blind. Her second thought was that she was buried alive. Her third thought, the one that came with sudden, terrible clarity, was that she was in agony. Every inch of her body screamed. Ribs broken, left arm shattered, right ankle twisted at an angle that couldn't be natural, blood in her mouth, the taste of copper and salt, something warm trickling down her face, head injury, possibly severe, possibly fatal if she didn't get help soon. She tried to move. Mistake. The pain intensified from unbearable to something beyond description, something that made her vision tunnel, made her stomach heave, made her wish she'd died on impact. But she hadn't died, and that meant something. It meant her training had worked, meant the impossible angle she'd managed in those final seconds had been just right, steep enough slope to dissipate some of the energy, deep enough snow to absorb the rest, lucky enough trajectory that she'd hit, rolled, tumbled down the mountainside instead of splattering against rock. Lucky, what a strange word for this. Alex forced herself to breathe, slow, controlled, assessment first. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Westmoreland's voice in her head, pain is information, listen to it but don't let it make decisions. She was buried in snow, not deep, maybe 2 feet, enough to hide her thermal signature from anyone searching with infrared, enough to provide some insulation against the mountain cold, but not enough to kill her, not yet. She began to dig, slowly, using her right arm since the left wouldn't respond. Each movement sent waves of agony through her broken ribs, but she kept going, inch by inch, scraping packed snow with fingers that were going numb, working her way toward what she hoped was up. The air was thin, altitude, probably 6,000 feet or higher. Her lungs struggled to pull in oxygen. Each breath felt like knives in her chest. Broken ribs, definitely. Maybe punctured lung, hard to tell. Everything hurt too much to isolate specific injuries. 20 minutes later, her hand broke through into open air. Cold wind on her fingers. The most beautiful sensation she'd ever felt. She was alive. Impossibly, incredibly, unbelievably alive. Getting out of the snow took another hour. Her body fought her with every movement. Muscles that should respond didn't. Limbs that should bend wouldn't. But she'd survived an 8,000-foot fall. She wasn't about to die buried in snow on a mountainside. When she finally pulled herself free, the moon had risen. Its light painted the Hindu Kush in shades of silver and shadow, beautiful in a terrible way. The kind of landscape that killed people for the smallest mistake. Alex took inventory. Left arm useless, probably compound fracture. She couldn't see in the darkness, but she could feel bones shifting where bones shouldn't shift. Right ankle sprained or broken. Ribs cracked, at least 3, possibly more. Head wound, still bleeding. Hypothermia setting in. No equipment, no supplies, no way to call for help. She was 70 miles from the nearest forward operating base. In enemy territory, at night, in winter, with injuries that should be fatal. Most people would lie down, would wait for rescue that wouldn't come, would let the cold take them peacefully, mercifully, finally. But there was something Alex hadn't told them yet. Something she discovered just before they threw her out of that helicopter. Something that changed everything. She knew who was behind the weapons smuggling, and it went higher than she'd imagined. Much higher. General Marcus Crawford, 3 stars, decorated combat veteran, respected leader, member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The man had been stealing and selling American weapons to the highest bidder for years, using men like Harmon to do his dirty work, eliminating anyone who got too close to the truth. Men like her father, who died in Panama investigating missing munitions. The thought gave her strength, made her stand despite the pain, made her take that first impossible step down the mountain. She'd survived the fall, now she had to survive the climb back. The terrain was treacherous, loose rock hidden under snow, ice patches that could send you tumbling down thousands of feet, cliffs that appeared without warning in the darkness. Every step was a negotiation with gravity and probability and pure stubborn will. Alex moved like a ghost, slowly, carefully, using her right arm to steady herself against rocks, dragging her left leg when the ankle refused to cooperate, stopping every few minutes to rest, to breathe, to fight the urge to just sit down and never get up. The night was brutally cold, temperature probably below 0. The wind cut through her uniform like it wasn't there. She couldn't feel her fingers anymore, couldn't feel her toes. Hypothermia was setting in faster than she could move. She'd studied survival in extreme conditions, knew the statistics. At this temperature with her injuries, she had maybe 4 hours before her body shut down completely, maybe less. 4 hours to cover 70 miles, impossible. But Alex wasn't trying to cover 70 miles. She was trying to cover the next 10 feet, then the next, then the next, breaking an impossible task into possible moments, the way Westmoreland had taught her. Rangers don't quit, he'd said. Not when it's hard, not when it's impossible, not when every rational thought says to give up. That's what makes us Rangers. We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. 2 hours into her descent, Alex found a cave, small, barely large enough to crawl into, but it was shelter from the wind, a place to rest, a place to assess. She examined her injuries in the dim moonlight filtering through the entrance. The head wound had clotted, good. The broken arm was bad. The bone had pierced skin, compound fracture, infection risk. She needed to set it, splint it, or she'd lose the arm even if she survived. Using her teeth and her good hand, she tore strips from her uniform, found 2 straight rocks to use as splints. Then, gritting her teeth against the pain, she pulled the bone back into alignment. The world went white. She tasted blood, bit through her lip to keep from screaming. The sound would carry in these mountains, would bring enemies or animals or both. When her vision cleared, the bone was set. Not perfect, not medically sound, but functional enough to maybe heal if she survived. She bound it with the cloth strips, using her teeth to tie knots one-handed. The ankle was next, definitely broken. She could feel the fracture, but it was a clean break, better than the arm. She fashioned a splint from more rocks and cloth, not comfortable, not ideal, but it would let her walk, barely. She rested in the cave for an hour, long enough for her body temperature to stabilize, long enough to regain some strength, not long enough to stiffen up completely. When she emerged, the moon was high. 3 hours until dawn. 3 hours of darkness to cover as much ground as possible. The descent continued, slower now with the splinted ankle, but more stable, more controlled. She was learning the rhythm of this new broken body, understanding its limitations, working within them. At some point during the night, she heard helicopters, distant, searching. Harmon's team probably making sure she was dead. She hid under an overhang, pressing herself against stone, controlling her breathing until the sound faded. They wouldn't find her. Not here, not in terrain this rugged, not unless she wanted to be found. Dawn broke pink and gold across the mountains, beautiful and terrible. The light revealed just how far she still had to go, valleys and ridges stretching endlessly. 70 miles might as well have been 700. But it also revealed something else. Smoke, thin, barely visible, rising from a valley maybe 5 miles distant. Village or camp or outpost, friendly or enemy she couldn't know, but it was human presence, and right now that was all that mattered. Alex adjusted her course. 5 miles. She could cover 5 miles, even broken, even frozen, even dying. She just had to keep moving. What do you do when the people you trust most become the people trying to kill you? The smoke Alex had seen came from a village, small, maybe 20 buildings clustered in a valley. She watched from the ridge above, assessing, looking for signs of Taliban presence, weapon emplacements, military-age males with tactical gear, anything that would indicate danger. What she saw instead were farmers, old men, women carrying water, children playing in the dirt, a normal Afghan village trying to survive in a war zone that had been their home for generations. She'd been watching for 3 hours. Her body was shutting down. The cold had progressed beyond pain into numbness, beyond numbness into nothing. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, could barely feel her hands. Her vision was tunneling, hypothermia in its final stages. She had maybe an hour left, maybe less. The decision was simple: risk the village or die on this mountain, some choice. Alex began her descent. It took 30 minutes to cover the half-mile. Her body was failing. The broken ankle couldn't support weight anymore. She was crawling more than walking, leaving a trail of blood in the snow, moving on instinct and willpower alone. She made it to the village outskirts before she collapsed. The last thing she saw was a woman's face. Old, weathered, eyes that had seen too much war, hands that reached toward her, gentle hands, kind hands. Then darkness took her. She woke in warmth, blankets, fire, heat, the smell of chai and bread and something medicinal, voices speaking Pashto, soft, concerned, arguing about something. Alex tried to move. Hands pressed her down. The old woman's face appeared above her, wrinkled, scarred, but smiling, saying something Alex's fever-addled brain couldn't translate. She was in a house, small, mud brick walls, carpets on the floor, a fire pit in the center, 3 women tending to her, changing bandages, applying poultices, forcing liquid between her lips. They'd stripped her of her uniform, dressed her wounds, set her broken bones properly, saved her life. Why? The question must have shown on her face because the old woman spoke, this time in broken English. Pashtunwali, she said, you are guest, we protect. Pashtunwali, the ancient tribal code, hospitality and protection for guests, even enemies, especially enemies, a tradition older than Islam, older than empires, older than the concept of nations. These women were risking everything to shelter an American soldier. If the Taliban found out, they'd all die. If the Afghan government found out, they might be branded collaborators. But the code demanded protection, and the code was everything. Alex tried to speak, to thank them, to explain, but her throat was too raw, her voice too weak. She managed only one word. "Why?" The old woman smiled sadly, touched Alex's face with fingers that had known hard work and harder losses. "Your father," she said. "Jason Morgan, Grenada. He saved my son long time ago. Now I save his daughter." The world tilted. How could this woman possibly know about her father, about Grenada, about anything? But then she remembered. The mission reports she'd read. Her father's unit had worked with Pashtun translators, had evacuated civilians caught in crossfire, had made promises to people whose names appeared in classified files and then disappeared into history. This woman's son must have been one of those translators, must have emigrated, must have told his mother about the American soldier who'd saved his life. And now, 30 years later, across the world, in a different war, in different circumstances, that debt was being repaid. The symmetry was almost poetic, almost beautiful, if it wasn't built on so much pain. Alex spent 3 days in that village, healing, not completely, not even close, but enough to walk, enough to think, enough to plan. The women never asked her what happened, never asked why an American soldier appeared broken and bleeding on their doorstep. They simply cared for her, fed her, protected her. On the 4th day, the old woman gave Alex clothes, traditional Afghan dress, long tunic and pants, headscarf, sandals, transformation from soldier to civilian, from target to invisible. "You must go," the old woman said. "Taliban come tomorrow, search for American soldier, cannot find you here." Alex understood. The women had done everything they could. Now she had to leave before she brought death to their doorstep. "How far to the border?" Alex asked. "Pakistan," the woman shook her head. 40 miles through mountains, through Taliban territory. Impossible." Impossible, that word again. Alex was beginning to hate it. The woman pressed something into Alex's hand. A satellite phone, old, battery probably dying, but functional. "From my son," she explained. "For emergency, you call, someone come." Someone maybe, if the phone worked, if she could get through, if whoever answered believed her, if. But it was more than she'd had 4 days ago. Alex left the village that night, wearing Afghan clothes, carrying the satellite phone, moving like a ghost through territory where her presence meant death. The journey to the border took 6 days. 6 days of walking through the night, hiding during the day, avoiding Taliban patrols, avoiding Afghan military, avoiding shepherds and farmers and anyone who might remember seeing a tall woman with green eyes who didn't belong. Her injuries screamed with every step. The broken arm was healing wrong. She could feel it. The ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. The ribs made breathing an exercise in controlled agony. But she kept moving. On the 3rd day, she used the satellite phone, called the emergency number Westmoreland had made her memorize years ago, a number that connected to a secure line, a number that was supposed to reach people who could help. The phone rang 17 times. She was about to give up when someone answered. "Identification," a male voice said, cold, professional, expecting a code phrase. Alex gave him one better. She gave him her service number, her unit designation, her last known operation. Silence on the other end. Then, "Staff Sergeant Morgan is KIA, confirmed 5 days ago. Who is this?" "This is Alexandra Morgan," she said, "and I'm very much alive. I need extraction, and I need to talk to Colonel James Harrington at the Pentagon. Tell him Phoenix is down but not dead." More silence, then "Stand by." She waited. The battery indicator showed 10%, maybe 5 minutes of talk time left, maybe less. A different voice came on, older, familiar. "Alex." "Harrington, thank God." "Sir, I survived the fall. I have information about General Crawford, about the weapons smuggling, about everything." "Where are you?" She gave him coordinates, her best estimate based on terrain and dead reckoning, close enough for extraction if they moved fast. "We'll have a team there in 12 hours, Harrington said. "Can you hold?" "I'll be here, sir." "Alex, we thought you were dead." Harmon filed reports. "Operational accident, equipment failure, it's already in the system." "It wasn't an accident, sir. It was attempted murder, and it goes all the way to the top." "I know," Harrington said quietly. "I've been investigating Crawford for 3 months. You got too close. He ordered Harmon to eliminate you." The confirmation hit like a punch. She'd suspected, but hearing it said aloud made it real, made it personal. "Sir, my father, Panama. Operation Just Cause, was he?" "Yes," Harrington interrupted. "Jason Morgan was investigating the same thing. Crawford had him killed. Made it look like combat casualty. I'm sorry, Alex." 30 years. Her father had been dead for 30 years, and she'd only now learned it was murder. The rage that filled her was cold, precise, focused, not the hot anger of revenge, the ice-cold calculation of justice. 12 hours, sir," she said. "I'll be ready." The phone died. Battery at 0, but it didn't matter. Help was coming. Alex found a cave, defensible position, high ground, clear sight lines. She fashioned a weapon from rocks and branches, not much, but better than nothing. Then she waited. The extraction team arrived exactly 12 hours later. Not Delta Force, not regular military, CIA Special Activities Division. Harrington had sent ghosts to extract a ghost. The team leader was a woman, 40-something, hard eyes, harder smile. She looked at Alex's injuries, at the makeshift splints, at the blood-stained Afghan clothes. "Staff Sergeant Morgan." "That's me." "Ma'am, you look like hell. You should see the other guy." The woman laughed. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. We're here to bring you home." Home? What a strange concept. Alex wasn't sure she had one anymore. The extraction was smooth. Helicopter to Pakistan, transport plane to Germany, medical evaluation at Landstuhl, then on to Washington. Throughout the journey, Alex slept. Real sleep. For the first time in over a week. Sleep without fear, without pain, without the constant vigilance that had kept her alive. When she woke, she was in a Pentagon medical facility. Clean, sterile, safe. Harrington was waiting. How do you prosecute a 3-star general when half the military answers to him? The Pentagon medical facility was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made Alex's instincts scream danger. She'd survived an 8,000-foot fall, a week in enemy territory, and hypothermia that should have killed her. She wasn't about to relax just because she was in friendly territory. Harrington sat beside her bed. He'd aged since she'd seen him last. More gray in his hair, more lines around his eyes. The weight of knowledge that corrupted men in high places, that soldiers were dying for someone's profit margin. "How bad is it?" Alex asked. "Meaning the injuries, meaning the investigation, meaning everything." "The doctors say you'll recover," Harrington replied. "Eventually. The arm will heal, but you'll have limited mobility. The ankle will never be the same. The ribs will hurt every winter for the rest of your life. You'll probably need a cane by the time you're 40. "That's not what I meant." "I know," he sighed, pulled out a folder, classified markings on every page. "General Marcus Crawford has been running weapons for 15 years, maybe longer. We've traced sales to insurgents in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Yemen. Sophisticated American equipment ending up in enemy hands. Hundreds of American casualties that can be directly linked to weapons he diverted. And my father." Jason Morgan discovered a shipment discrepancy in Panama. Soviet weapons that should have been destroyed were disappearing. He reported it through proper channels. Crawford was a colonel then. He had your father's unit ambushed, made it look like enemy action, buried the investigation under operational security. Alex felt the cold rage settle deeper. colder than the Hindu Kush, colder than the snow that should have been her grave. How many others? That we know of, 17. Soldiers who got too close, asked too many questions, noticed patterns they shouldn't have noticed, all listed as KIA, all properly honored, all murdered by the man who sent them into combat. Why hasn't he been arrested? Harrington's expression darkened. Because half of JSOC answers to him. Because he has friends in Congress, in defense, in intelligence. Because exposing him means exposing a conspiracy that reaches into every branch of the military. The kind of scandal that could cripple our operational readiness for years. So we do nothing. I didn't say that. Harrington opened the folder. We've been building a case, quietly, very quietly, financial records, communication intercepts, testimony from operators who suspected but couldn't prove. What we didn't have was someone who survived Crawford's cleanup operation, someone who could testify to direct action. You want me to be the witness. I want you to be the nail in his coffin. Alex considered this. The pain in her body, the rage in her heart, the memory of her father's grave, the flag she'd been given, the lies she'd believed. What do you need? We need Crawford to make a mistake, to reveal himself. We have evidence, but it's circumstantial. Financial crimes are hard to prove when you have clearance to move money for legitimate operations. But attempted murder of a federal officer, that's different. That's prosecutable. That's the one crime we can make stick if we can get him to try again. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you a choice. You can disappear. New identity, medical discharge, pension, protected status. Live your life somewhere Crawford can't reach, or you can help us catch him, help us end this. Help us make sure no other soldier dies because someone wanted to make a profit. It wasn't really a choice. Not for someone like Alex Morgan. Not for someone whose father had died for the same cause. Not for someone who'd fallen 8,000 feet and survived. What's the plan? Harrington smiled. Not a happy smile, a predator's smile. We let Crawford think you're recovering here, under protection but vulnerable. We let him think you're going to testify, and we wait for him to send Harmon or someone like Harmon to finish the job. And when they come, we'll be ready. The plan was audacious, dangerous, probably illegal. Using a recovering soldier as bait to catch a general required cutting through so much red tape it might as well have been a suicide mission. But then again, Alex had already survived one of those. The setup took 2 weeks, long enough for Alex's injuries to stabilize, long enough for the story to leak through proper channels. Staff Sergeant Morgan survived, in protective custody, expected to testify before a closed congressional hearing. Crawford would hear. He'd have to act. Men like him didn't survive by leaving witnesses. Alex was moved to a safe house in rural Virginia, officially a rehabilitation facility. Actually, a surveillance operation. Every room had cameras. Every window had sensors. Every approach was monitored by teams Harrington trusted personally. But there was one blind spot. Deliberately, carefully, a maintenance door in the basement, just vulnerable enough that someone very skilled might use it for access, bait for the trap. Harmon took it. He came on the 14th night, 3 a.m., new moon, perfect operational conditions. He disabled the security on the maintenance door exactly the way they'd anticipated, moved through the basement with professional precision, found his way to Alex's room. She was waiting. Not in bed, not vulnerable, standing beside the door with a tactical shotgun Harrington had provided, injuries still healing but functional, angry enough to ignore the pain. Harmon entered silently, night vision goggles, suppressed pistol, moving like the elite operator he'd once been before corruption made him a murderer. "Hello, Blake," Alex said. He spun, weapon rising, but she was faster, the shotgun barrel pressed against his chest before he could fire. "Drop it," she said. For a moment, she thought he might try anyway, might gamble that he could get a shot off before she pulled the trigger. But Harmon was a survivor. He let the pistol clatter to the floor. "You should be dead," he said. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Lights flooded the room. Harrington and his team poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands, securing Harmon with professional efficiency. But Alex kept the shotgun trained on him, kept her finger on the trigger, kept her eyes locked on the man who'd thrown her out of a helicopter. "Why?" she asked. Harmon smiled. No fear, no regret, just cold calculation. Crawford pays better than Uncle Sam, and he doesn't ask stupid questions about morality. "My father asked those questions." "Yeah, that's why he's dead, just like you should be." Alex wanted to pull the trigger, wanted it so badly her finger trembled. 30 years of wondering, of grieving, of carrying her father's legacy. And here was the man who served the system that killed him. "Alex," Harrington said quietly, "we need him alive." She knew that Harmon's testimony could bring down Crawford, could expose the entire conspiracy, could give meaning to her father's death and the deaths of 16 others. She lowered the shotgun. "Get him out of my sight." They took Harmon away, left Alex standing in the room, shaking, not from fear, from rage, from the terrible certainty that even now, even with evidence and witnesses and proof, Crawford might still escape. "We got him," Harrington said. "Harmon will testify. He knows the death penalty is on the table. He'll give us Crawford to save himself. And if he doesn't, then we use your testimony, your survival, the satellite records from the helicopter, the medical reports, the timeline. We have enough to prosecute even without Harmon." 2 months later, Alex sat in a closed congressional hearing, her left arm in a permanent brace, her ankle requiring a cane, her ribs aching with every breath. But she was alive, and she was talking. She told them everything: the fall, the survival, the village, the extraction, the conspiracy that had killed her father and 17 others. General Marcus Crawford sat across from her, 3 stars on his shoulders, ribbons on his chest, the perfect image of an American hero, but his eyes were cold, calculating, already planning his defense. The hearing lasted 6 hours. At the end, Crawford was arrested, escorted from the building in handcuffs. 3-star general reduced to accused criminal. The image was captured by every news camera in Washington. But Alex felt no satisfaction, no victory, just exhaustion. She'd survived, but survival wasn't the same as winning. What happens when you destroy the conspiracy, but can't destroy the doubt it planted? The trial of General Marcus Crawford became the military scandal of the decade. Networks covered it constantly. Analysts debated it endlessly. The public consumed every detail of how a decorated general had betrayed his oath for profit. Alex testified for 3 days, laid out the evidence, described her father's death, explained the pattern of murders disguised as combat casualties, showed the financial trails that led directly to Crawford's accounts. The prosecution's case was airtight. Harmon had indeed testified, providing details about operations, payoffs, the mechanics of the conspiracy. Other operators came forward, men who'd suspected but said nothing, men who'd participated and now sought redemption or lighter sentences. Crawford's defense tried to discredit Alex, suggested her injuries had caused psychological damage, questioned her memory, implied she was fabricating events out of grief for her father. But the evidence didn't lie. The jury deliberated for 16 hours, returned a verdict of guilty on all counts: conspiracy, corruption, 17 counts of murder, treason. General Marcus Crawford was sentenced to life in prison at Fort Leavenworth. No possibility of parole, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all rank, benefits, and pension. "Justice," the news anchor said. "The system works," the politicians declared. A great tragedy but also a great triumph, the military brass announced. Alex watched it all from a Pentagon conference room. Harrington sat beside her. Westmoreland had flown in for the verdict. Together, they watched Crawford being led away in shackles. "How do you feel?" Westmoreland asked. Alex considered the question, really considered it. How did she feel? "Empty," she finally said. Because that was the truth. Crawford's conviction didn't bring back her father, didn't undo the years of grief and uncertainty, didn't heal the wounds, physical or otherwise, that would mark her forever. Victory was supposed to feel better than this. "That's normal," Westmoreland said. "Justice isn't the same as closure. Punishment isn't the same as peace. You did what needed doing, but that doesn't make it easy." "What now?" Alex asked. Harrington exchanged a look with Westmoreland. Something unspoken passed between them, a decision already made. "We have a proposition," Harrington said. He handed her a folder, unmarked except for a small emblem Alex didn't recognize, a phoenix rising from flames. Inside were transfer orders, to a unit designation she'd never seen, under Joint Special Operations Command but with unique operational parameters. "What is this?" "A new task force," Harrington explained, "designed to identify and eliminate internal security threats before they reach Crawford's level. You'd be working directly under JSOC, outside normal chains of command, autonomous authority to investigate military personnel of any rank. You're creating a unit to police our own." "Not police," Westmoreland corrected. "Protect. The oath we take isn't to any individual or administration. It's to the Constitution. This unit's mission is to ensure that oath remains sacred." Alex studied the documents. Both Harrington and Westmoreland were listed as commanding officers. The unit would be small, elite, operating in the shadows. "Why me?" "Because you fell 8,000 feet without a parachute and not only survived, but completed your mission," Harrington replied. "Because you understand that sometimes protecting the institution means working outside its normal parameters. Because you never quit even when the system itself betrayed you." "Because you're already dead," Westmoreland added. "Officially, Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan is KIA. Her file is sealed. Her records classified. The woman sitting here doesn't exist in any database. That gives you freedom to operate that no active-duty soldier has." Alex looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back was familiar but changed, scarred, damaged, but unbroken. She'd spent 10 years trying to honor her father's legacy, trying to be the ranger he'd wanted her to become. But maybe his real legacy wasn't the tab on her shoulder. Maybe it was the willingness to do what was right even when the system said it was wrong. "When do we start?" Westmoreland's weathered face creased in a rare smile. "We already have. Welcome to the Phoenix program, Morgan. Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we're the last line of defense against the enemy within." The Phoenix program operated from a nondescript office building in McLean, Virginia. No military insignia, no government seals, just another corporate office in a city full of them. But inside, the walls were lined with files, cases that had never been solved, suspicious deaths, missing equipment, financial irregularities, the accumulated evidence of corruption that traditional investigations couldn't touch. Alex's first assignment was a Navy captain in San Diego, suspected of diverting funds from shipyard maintenance contracts. Small scale compared to Crawford, but corruption was like cancer. You didn't wait for it to metastate before removing it. She approached the investigation with the same methodical precision she'd brought to special operations. Research, surveillance, pattern analysis, building a case that would survive any scrutiny. It took 3 months, but when they arrested Captain Williams, the evidence was undeniable. He'd stolen $2.3 million over 5 years, used it to buy a vacation home in Cabo, thought he was untouchable because he had friends in naval intelligence. He was wrong. The Phoenix program had no friends, no political considerations, no career advancement to protect. They answered only to the mission, and the mission was sacred. Over the next 2 years, Alex led 17 investigations. 11 resulted in convictions, 4 in quiet resignations, 2 in ongoing operations still classified. She'd become a ghost in the machine. The woman who fell 8,000 feet and survived, now falling through the cracks of the military bureaucracy, finding the rot that others couldn't see. Her body never fully healed. The arm had limited mobility. The ankle required a brace. The ribs ached in cold weather. She walked with a slight limp that would never disappear. But her mind was sharp, her instincts honed, her determination absolute. Westmoreland had been right. She wasn't most people. Most people would have died in that fall. Most people would have stayed dead even if they survived. But Alex Morgan had learned something in those terrible seconds falling through Afghan darkness. Had learned it again in the snow, in the village, in the mountains. She'd learned that survival wasn't about avoiding death. It was about refusing to let death decide when you were done. 3 years after Crawford's conviction, Alex sat in her Phoenix program office. Rain streaked the windows. The city beyond was gray and tired. Files covered her desk. New cases, new corruption. The work was endless. Her phone buzzed, Harrington's name on the screen. "Morgan, we have a situation. Army major at Fort Hood, suspected of selling classified training materials to foreign intelligence. Need you there yesterday." "Understood. I'll be on the next flight." Alex Harrington paused. "How are you doing, really?" It was a question he asked periodically, checking in, making sure the mission hadn't consumed her the way it consumed so many who worked in shadows. "I'm good, sir, doing what needs doing." "Your father would be proud." The words hit harder than she expected. 3 years, 17 investigations, countless hours, and still those 4 words mattered more than all the rest. "Thank you, sir." She ended the call, stood, grabbed her go-bag from the closet. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. This was her life, her purpose, her way of honoring the legacy that had been stolen from her father. As she left the office, Alex caught her reflection in the glass door, scars visible, limp apparent, the marks of survival written on her body. But her eyes were clear, determined, unbroken. She'd fallen 8,000 feet, survived the impossible, destroyed a conspiracy, built something new from the ashes. The phoenix had fallen, but she'd risen, and she would keep rising, keep fighting, keep protecting the oath that meant more than rank, more than career, more than life itself. Because that's what Rangers did. They led the way, even when the way was dark, even when the path was uncertain, even when falling seemed inevitable. They led and they never quit. Sometimes dignity doesn't announce itself. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like victory. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, in shadows, where medals aren't awarded and glory never comes. But the fight matters anyway. The oath matters anyway. The truth matters anyway. And sometimes, the woman who falls becomes the woman who ensures no one else has to fall the same way. That's not heroism. That's duty. That's honor. That's the quiet dignity of serving something greater than yourself, even when the cost is everything you have. Alexandra Morgan had paid that cost, and she'd do it again. Because some debts can only be repaid by living a life worthy of those who died so you could live yours. Her father had died fighting corruption. She'd survived to finish what he started. The symmetry wasn't poetic, it was just true. And truth, in the end, was the only thing worth falling for.